Good afternoon. Over the years, I've written stories for different occasions: Christmas, New Year's, Thanksgiving, Easter. We're jumping ahead in the season, but I think we need something to kind of deliver us from the doldrums that we're in during the virus season here. So let's think about Thanksgiving. The name of this story is Thanksgiving Memories. Thanksgiving is the strangest of holidays. I knew the meaning of Christmas probably before I knew there was a Santa Claus. I suppose that's because I was raised in a Christian family and knew that Christmas was the celebration of Christ's birth. But what was the meaning of Thanksgiving? Some could say it was just a trial run for testing out the Christmas dinner. In farming communities such as ours, only 4 days were celebrated. Those were Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, and the 4th of July. Farmers did not celebrate Veterans Day, Memorial Day, Labor Day, or any of the other holidays that we celebrate now. They couldn't take off from work during the week. In the South, some did not celebrate the 4th of July because that was the day that Vicksburg fell. By November, the crops were in and the results of their year's labor were known. If the rain had been adequate and the insects were few, they were thankful. If those things were not favorable, it was still time to be thankful. Thankful that there would be next year. If they could just hold on to the farm, they would have another chance. I did not learn about the Pilgrims, the Indians, and the maize they grew until I was in the 3rd or 4th grade. In our class, we painted a mural on the wall, and each child had to paint some Thanksgiving figure. I painted an Indian. To be politically correct, I painted a Native American. At that time, I envisioned the Indians as a benevolent group of poorly clothed creatures that saved the Pilgrims from certain starvation with their gifts of corn and wild game. I'm not sure this is the way it actually was, but that is how I remember thinking it was at the time. What a nice gesture from those kind people. Looking back, it would only be a couple of years before the influence of modern movies would change the image I had. The movies would transform them from benevolent beings to rampaging savages. John Wayne was much more real than our class mural, and, unfortunately, I lost the honorable view of them, as most kids my age did. In my family, Thanksgiving was always a bigger holiday than Christmas. Bigger because most people could attend, as they spent Christmas Day with their specific families. It was also a time that the men ventured into the woods for some sort of hunting, and it had become a Thanksgiving ritual. Before I was old enough to tag along, my uncles and my dad would quail hunt in the morning. My uncle had a champion bird dog named Jack, and I looked forward to their return as I could spend the afternoon playing with the dog. The festivities were always at my maternal grandparents' house, and, being from the old school, my grandmother could cook. She cooked comfort food, as we would call it today, and there was plenty of it. She may cook the quail that had been harvested, but most likely she would cook as many as 8 hens, as she carefully selected them the week before. She had placed them in a cup and fed them grain. This purged them of impurities. She did not serve a turkey, as chicken was considered to be a more tender delicacy. Some of the other foods where the Pilgrims could have only hoped for were dressed with cranberry sauce, butter beans, English peas, deviled eggs, crowder peas, sweet potato pone, green beans, turnip greens, usually at least one other meat besides the chicken, and 2 kinds of cornbread. All those things were always on the table. The dessert was always an assortment of apple, pecan, egg custard, or sweet potato pie. The drink was either ice water or sweet iced tea. Occasionally a relative would bring a mincemeat pie. This puzzled me, as I could not imagine what kind of an animal a mince was, or why we did not hunt one. Did it look something like a mink? I knew I did not like mincemeat. As years passed, I was included in the hunting trips, but by this time, due to age, some of the older uncles were dropping out. We were a new generation of hunters. We searched the woods for squirrels and rabbits rather than quail. The art of training a good bird dog had been lost. We mostly hunted after the noon meal now, rather than before, probably because our younger generation enjoyed a late morning sleep. One Thanksgiving, for some reason, no one was coming to hunt, either in the morning or the afternoon. Football was now on TV. Age, combined with a loss of interest, contributed to the change. For whatever reason, there was no one to go with me. I was about 11 or 12 years old, and I was very proficient with my single-shot shotgun. I decided, and no one objected, that I would go alone. I went to the same forest that I had gone to for the last couple of years with my uncles and brother, but it was not the forest that I was most familiar with. I left about 7 o'clock in the morning and walked into the woods directly behind my grandparents' home. Then I ventured deeper into the woods. The independence I felt that day from my first solo hunt promised to make this a most exciting day. I intended to be gone 2 or 3 hours and be back well before Thanksgiving dinner. At some point, I decided to return home, having only minimal success. I thought I was retracing my route, but soon I came to a substantial fence. I knew I had not crossed a fence. I realized I was lost. Not turned around, I was lost. If you've never been lost in the forest, you cannot relate to the feeling of fear and panic that can overcome you, especially if you're a child. Your first instinct is to run. Run so that you can cover as much territory as possible quickly in hopes of finding your way out. I ran and I ran until I was exhausted. In my panic, it never occurred to me that this patch of woods was too small for me to be hopelessly lost. Someone would find me, but I didn't reason that way. Finally, exhausted, I sat down almost in tears. In fact, I was in tears. I could see my mother crying when I never returned, and she would always wonder what had happened to me. I was more concerned about how she was going to take my death than my own fear of dying. Let me assure you, I was frightened of dying also, because I knew I would most likely starve to death, and I was already hungry. I had started my hunt with only 6 16-gauge shotgun shells. I had expended 2 on the game I had killed. This left me with 4. I knew that 3 shots fired in succession was a hunter's form of SOS. I fired 3 rounds, leaving 1. I waited. I was panicked and impatient, and for about 10 minutes, I decided that no one was coming for me. Finally, digging into my Christian background, I prayed and I prayed. I don't know how long I was in that state of meditation, but suddenly I heard something, a motorcycle in the distance. It did not have a muffler. It had to be on a road somewhere. I started walking in the direction of the sound. After about an hour, I came to the road. I soon recognized where I was and realized that in road miles, I was about 6 miles from home. Through the woods, it was only about 3 miles. A 6-mile walk after the exhausting experience seemed almost impossible, but I realized I had to do it, as I was not about to try to go back through the woods and risk getting lost again. Soon I heard the motorcycle again. I flagged it down. It was an older kid I knew. We called him Spud Tater Leggett. He gave me a ride to within about a half mile of my grandmother's house. I knew if the grown-ups had known I was on a motorcycle, I would have been in more trouble than I would if I had not come home at all. I did not tell my family about my experience, and after about an hour, Thanksgiving dinner was served. My grandfather thanked Jesus for everything that had happened during the entire year. The prayer must have lasted 10 minutes, and then he said, Amen. I kept my head bowed. I kept my head bowed because I had a special thanks to give. I was thankful for a motorcycle without a muffler. I never spent a Thanksgiving without remembering that I had something to really be thankful for some 55 years ago. Then I realized I've had many things to be thankful for since, and now. Afterthought. Even today, if I go into a strange forest, such as the Honey Island Swamp, I stay close to streams and landmarks. Being lost is not fun, even for an adult.